Welcome to Queer Journalism. We're going to be covering photojournalism today. My name is Anthony Palomini. I am the publisher of Out Northwest and also co-editor-in-chief. It is a pleasure to have you taking this course. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. Polly has been an amazing instructor to partner with. Um, I want to go into the importance of photojournalism. Without pictures and graphics and visuals, words tend to get lost on a page and people stop really reading. Um, and so it's important to be able to grasp the visuals of a story. We have all heard a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's very true. It gives context, it gives emotion, it gives the actual scene, it sets up how people are feeling and who's involved. Um, and so today's class is all about photojournalism, how to actually bring it to life and how to implement it correctly. Many of you look at it probably as you're a writer, not a photographer. But to understand the importance of being able to capture photojournalism, especially if you're working with a photographer and you're covering a story, it's very important for you as a writer, as a true narrator of the story, to help direct what your photographer is taking to make sure it aligns with the story that you're wanting to tell. So let's kind of jump in. So next, photojournalism is a type of journalism that uses photography to convey news. Photojournalists collect, edit, and present images for publication or broadcast. These images can appear in print newspapers, magazines, online media sites, and microblogging platforms. A picture can enhance the story that the news article communicates to its readers. That's the definition. Um, and it's very important. You can actually tell an entire story without words. Um, you can take a picture of a sign of the city so people get a context of where it's located. You can get a picture of a newspaper or a date or something that kind of records the time. Um, you were able to build that storyline as much as you want, even within pictures. Important buildings, you can really showcase the specific location. Um, so with photojournalism, how can photojournalism still be impactful in today's world? The power of visual storytelling. Um, it can evocate and immediate. Uh, Photographs have the extraordinary power to convey complex stories instantly. A single image can cut through the noise of information overload and evoke strong emotions, fostering empathy and understanding. And what that means is instead of getting all the words, all the descriptors, how everything's feeling, a picture really cuts through to what is happening. You get one still picture, and you can have the surrounding, the actual setting of it be there. You can have the characters and the people that are a part of it. Um, you can see the emotion that is really happening. Um, I mean, some of the pictures that I recall, I mean, Tiananmen Red Square, um, the monk burning himself. Uh, there are so many pictures that just show emotion in the entire scene of what's happening, and you can feel it without even reading a single word. Um, uh, Unfiltered reality. In a world where information can easily be manipulated, photojournalism provides a sense of unfiltered truth. Um, oh, let me go back. Sorry. Um, of unfiltered truth. Um, I wish that was 100% real today. Um, Unfortunately, with doctored photos and everything else, you do have to be careful of what really is a true photo. Um, Especially in the world of AI. We are starting to hit a new reality of how what is real and what isn't real is going to be coming into play. While there's some incredible purposes for AI, um, it is going to have a major impact of what reality truly is. Um, how can photojournalism still be impactful in today's world? Driving awareness and action, spotlight on social issues. A major one that a lot of people will know over the last 5 years, the pandemic, how the pandemic hit. Um, I remember pre-COVID, we all kind of looked at China and Asian cultures with them wearing face masks and going, why did they do that? Why do they do that? And then COVID hit, and the entire world learned kind of what it meant to wear a face mask. Um, and it's something that we saw pictures of people in China going, oh, they're overly worried, blah, blah, blah. And then now we all understand that importance. We had that culture shock and we saw it in real life. Photojournalism kind of helps impact that. Um, Black Lives Matter movement and what happened. I mean, we as the organization are based kind of in the Seattle area. We had Chaz, we had the entire Capitol Hill community taking over and kicking the police out. That caused a huge national scene for it being the autonomous zone. And there's so many incredible pictures and stories that came out from that entire situation. Um, so spotlight on social issues. Photojournalism brings to light important social, political, and environmental issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. It can expose injustices, document humanitarian crises, and give a voice to the marginalized. Um, as of today, I mean, the Olympics are happening right now. That is something that is huge, and it's not going to be just a spotlight on the athletes, it's going to be a spotlight on how Paris is being impacted. Um, how there's the vandalism on the train tracks in France that were happening from it. The environmental impacts from Olympics all over the world. What happens to these huge stadiums if they're not used? There's a ton of things that photojournalism helps document. Um, Sparking change. Powerful images can not only raise awareness, but galvanize action. They can compel viewers to demand change, donate to causes, or shift public opinion on important matters. That right there is a huge part of photojournalism in war zones. When we see the impact and the devastation right now happening in the Gaza Strip, happening in Ukraine, happening in any other of these battle zones throughout the world, and we see the human impact. Hmm. Um, It might not even have to be a war zone. It can be humanitarian. It can be documenting the drug crisis happening in America. Um, there are some photojournalists that do like to try to document the homeless crisis and the drug problem, and they will take pictures of users shooting up so that people can really see the impact that that has on society. Or they'll take pictures of a very public street that is used all the time, let's say up in Seattle. I know there's areas literally 2 or 3 blocks away from Pike Street Market, or Pike Place Market, that are littered with needles and foil. Um, Pictures like that can really bring change and inspire people to take action. Another important impact that photojournalism has is it's always documenting history. If you go through archives, if you go through newspapers, pictures help make it to where history is recorded, not written. And I want to bring this kind of up as a very, very important subject because in this course, I know I've always gotten the question, why queer journalism? Why is there even a queer journalism course? Shouldn't it not just be journalism? And the question is, yes, journalism is at the core. You should always have your ethics, you should always have that. There's always going to be a perceived bias, intentional or non-intentional, no matter how good you are, no matter how you try to report the news, there's always a bias. And the reason for that is we're human. When we write, when we decide, think about it this way. You're a journalist or a photojournalist, and you wake up and you're like, what do I want to cover today? The pure fact of you trying to decide what to cover has bias because you were choosing what you were covering. Now, if you work for a news outlet and you're sent to, uh, let's say, cover a political campaign, you still have bias, even if you're being assigned that. Because what you're doing is you get to pick the pictures. You are the one holding the camera, deciding what you're taking pictures of, deciding what is important to you. And that is bias. If you're driving down, you're coming up with a story, and you come up with a story, you chose to write that story. And you writing that story meant another story isn't being covered, that something else isn't being covered. Bias you can't get away from. But within ethics, it's taking your own personal perception of what you're writing about or what you're taking a photograph of and trying to keep that away from it so that the subject itself comes through on its own accord. That's the importance of being a true journalist is you're always going to have bias because you're working on it. You're human, you have context, it's going to be in there. But the importance of documenting history is you get to go through and immortalize crucial moments in history, from wars and protests to cultural events and scientific discoveries. Photographs ensure that future generations will have a visual record of our times. And that's immensely and powerful. What, and I brought up queer journalism for a reason. What has happened so much in the past is main media neglects marginalized communities. And that's why you end up having counterculture media outlets. You have Essence magazine because the black community was not being reported correctly and often enough for what that community deserved. So Essence magazine came around. The gay magazines have been around for over a century. I mean, Berlin had them before World War II. They had a ton of them. Little gay rags. New York, all over. But they were for our community because we were not being recorded by mainstream. And the sad part is all these smaller rags rarely get into the archives. They rarely get preserved into history. And so, as marginalized communities, our history is erased because it's never properly recorded. And if we aren't there with our own voices as a people representing our community, we can also be very much erased, even if it is there. It can be retranslated, re-changed. It's kind of like the hieroglyph in Egypt documenting the first gay couple in history. In Egypt, it's known as the brothers hieroglyph. Now, around the world, it's recognized as the first gay couple as documented in written history, about 3,000 years old. But in Egypt today, because they don't recognize homosexuality in itself, and they're not going to give credit there, they erase the actual intention of what that hieroglyph is and call it the brothers hieroglyph. It is actively erasing a marginalized community's history. Um, Context and evidence. Photojournalism provides visual context to historical events, allowing for a deeper understanding of the past and its complexities. These images act as evidence guarding against revisionism and distortion of history. For many of you that might not understand what revisionism is, for a lot of us, I would say one of the biggest events that we can think of is watching the TV January 6th, 2021, when what seemed to be kind of a counter protest to the electoral college count turned into chaos, turned into a riot and a overtaking of the Capitol building. We all saw that play out on live TV, the impact. We saw how drastic and terrorist that moment was. We saw a Congress pull together itself afterwards, condemning every aspect of it. We saw Vice President Mike Pence uphold his sworn duty and continue on. That was documented. Revisionism is all the people that participated and are trying to validate minimalizing that impact are revisioning what January 6th was. They're trying to create a different narrative of how that happened, why it happened. And that's a revisioning. It's not true. We could literally go through and watch all of the live video, all the photography, everything, and see really what happened and relive those true moments and know exactly what it was. But they're going to try to change the context and the narrative and tell a different story to minimize how dramatic and terroristic that event was in American history. That's what revisioning is, and distortion of the truth. Um, and that's why it's so important to preserve and document and film and photograph all of these different things. Photojournalism can promote cross-cultural understanding, breaking down barriers. Photojournalism transcends language barriers. You don't really have very much language. You might have a few signs. You might have a few things like that. You could have American Sign Language actually kind of telling a statement. And what I mean by that is a word or a action in one gesture that can be in a still shot. Um, but photojournalism transcends language barriers. Photos of people from different cultures, backgrounds can build bridges, foster empathy, and challenge stereotypes. Humanizing global events. By bringing faces and stories behind global events into focus, photojournalism can personalize distant issues and generate a sense of shared humanity. We can look at this as a mother holding her dead son in a war zone. Every parent around the world is gonna sympathize. Seeing a starving child, everybody can sympathize. Mourning somebody, everybody can sympathize. But away from even the negatives, celebrating a huge achievement, a marriage from around the world can spark joy. Um, and they can come in so many different forms. Marriage in India is very different than a marriage here in the US. And all around the world, they can show and share this beauty no matter what the culture is of that important day. And there are so many different things that can bring us as the human civilization together, no matter where and what culture we come from. How to prepare to tell your story through photojournalism. One, define your focus. Start with a question. What story are you drawn to? Is it a social issue, a local injustice, a hidden community? Having a central question helps shape your project. Specific, the specificist, being specific is key. I'm gonna leave it there. Sorry, my tongue is twisted this morning or afternoon. A narrowly defined topic will make the story stronger. Homelessness in my city is better than the broad concept of homelessness. Consider your angle. What unique perspective, and this is where bias comes in. What unique perspective or aspect can you bring to the story? This helps you stand out and find the core of what you want to convey. What you want to convey is that bias I talk about. It's that how are you covering it? Um, a really good example, let's say you're a journalist and you're gonna cover Trump. Seems simple. How are you gonna cover him? Are you covering only the facts and trying to minimize and you're doing only fact information? Or are you covering it from a liberal side, trying to paint him more as that villain? Or are you covering him from a conservative side, covering him more as that savior? Um, it all depends on that perspective. And that perspective has bias, whether you want to or not. Even if you think about it this way, if you are a photographer, you can say, well, you can't really have that much bias as a photographer. If you go through and you pick a whole bunch of pictures, there's pictures of a subject in a very strong, convincing situation. There's pictures of them in a very vulnerable, emotional state. That all depends on what you're trying to tell and share. You hear people say, I have a good angle and a bad angle, a good side and a bad side. If you choose to always shoot them from the bad side, you're showing the bad side of them. You're showing something that isn't flattering. You're not trying to show them in a good light. And that's with bias. If you always are only showing them in a good side, you have that bias of only trying to portray them in a positive light as well. That's all bias. Um, hmm, Number two, research and immersion. Deep background knowledge. Dig into the history, statistics, and current debates around your topic. Talk to experts, and if possible, bring directly, and if possible, people directly impacted. Get to know what it is that you're trying to cover. Um, if you are covering here in Washington, we had the Oso landslide where it wiped out an entire community. Get to know the background, get to know what, who, why, and how it happened, and get to know the people. Taking a picture of the devastation, taking a picture of the people will help convey that story even more. Understand the nuance. Go beyond the surface level facts. Look for the complexities, the opposing viewpoints, and the untold stories that create a richer narrative. Even if you are going to be biased, you should always try to counter effect your bias in it. And what I mean by that is, as a photojournalist, let's say you are covering a political candidate and you see them up on stage at a rally and they're up there being their strong, competent, confident, energetic self that is just over the top alive. A great way to counter that is to see the picture of them holding someone, of them holding hands with their partner. That's something that can bring the added complexity and the opposing viewpoints. If everything's strong, find the soft side to it. Try to balance what you're saying. and how it feels. Field work, if possible, spend time in the environment where your story takes place. Witness firsthand what you're trying to document. That comes in especially if you're doing location specific, getting to understand where it's at. Let's say you're covering a monument. Here in America, there's been a history of changing our political perspectives and trying to not celebrate the negative influences that did help build America, but did it in a very wrong way, and trying to not celebrate them for them being oppressors. Um, and so we did take down quite a few statues in the South because they celebrated just very negative aspects, a very negative people that did help build America, but they're just horrible people in that aspect of how they did it. And a really good way to get to know your environment is if you're covering, let's say, the removal of a statue, get to know the city that is in. Get to know why that statue was there. Get to know the importance of it. Doesn't even have any importance to that city still. Is it something that people don't even realize it's there? It's something that you might be able to go through and cover. This town didn't even really realize that this statue has been here. Why is it important for it to be kept if they never even really cared or thought about it being there? There's a lot of aspects that you can bring in that you can do. Um, the planning phase, visual storytelling arc. Think about the beginning, middle, and end of your story. That needs to happen visually to create a compelling narrative. I always say storyboard your photography. If you are both writer and photographer of your story, you can, well, here's a really good way to look at it. This is what I do for myself as a journalist. When I am doing my own stories, I look at if I'm doing an interview or some coverage, I look at what questions am I asking? Um, I'll go into an example. When I covered Rick Steves and I had him on the cover of our travel issue for Out Northwest, I'm the one that interviewed him. And I did my research. I went through and created the questions. And I started looking at what are some of the things that I want to know based upon my research, and what would actually come across really well as a photo or a video. Um, a really good example is he talks about his history and the first time that he went over to Europe with his dad to the piano factory. And he talks about he bought a piano when he was 16 before he even had a car. He talks about he started doing postcards and writing on the back and detailing about every place that he was at in that postcard and sending it home to his parents. And he just kept on doing that, and it turned into journaling, and then it turned into the empire that he's built as Rick Steves Europe. And those were things I'm like, that is incredible. I don't know if I've ever really seen his postcards. I don't know if I've really seen the piano that he bought when he was 16. Let me build those into the storylines of what I would love to tell. Um, and I was fortunate enough to be able to take my photographer and direct the photo shoot to visually tell how that interview went. And then he was able to help supplement with added pictures from his history that I wasn't able to take. I can help create that narrative. And never be afraid of asking people for pictures to help bring a historical perspective, even if it's not your own pictures. Um, a good example, I asked for some pictures of when he was a kid, and he talked about being in the gay pride parade in Seattle with his Lutheran group as a major ally to the LGBTQ community. He found a picture of him in the parade being an ally to our community. That's something that's extremely important. Um, Shot list. Not every shot needs to be planned out, but brainstorm key elements. Es- Establishing shots. Sets the scene, gives context. That could be, mm, if you're talking about water quality, it could be a clean glass of water, um, of drinkable water. It could be eh, trash. It could be. I kind of call that. What is your cover picture of your story? Is your establishing shot? It really does tell what the topic of your story is going to be all in one shot. Think about it that way. Portraits, it's human face. And the only way to make a story really relatable, you have to include people. If you don't include people or animals, sometimes animals will, a human holding an animal or helping, even better. Um, but yeah, you have to really start having people in your stories. Um, because it connects us as humans to the story if you see another human in it. Action shots. That really does help. I would say it's a good transition. It helps your story move along. It kind of is that action. It's conveying here's this part of the story. Now we're moving to this part of the story. And the action shot actually helps as a true transition. Details. Um, Small objects, getting into really building that rich texture of the story is something that you can do. Um, and closing shot. What conclusionary shot would you like to bring to it? It could be a picture of a new well if you're talking about clean water. It could be a treatment facility. It could be if you're talking about health and human. It could be if you're talking about immunization and all that. Let's say malaria immunization. You might start with a needle or a syringe with the medication, go into the story, go into the human aspect of it, getting a picture of a child with malaria and how skinny and sick they are, um, going into the injection. Your close-up could also be the injection site or the medication itself or whatever is going to help convey that the child getting the shot is really the action. It's here's the medication, here's the action of us actually helping, and then your conclusion could be that child actually healthy. Um, it all depends on how that narrative and that storyline arc or storytelling arc goes and how you want to build it. Um, Very important to go that way. How to prepare to tell your story through photojournalism, gear and technical considerations. What camera are you gonna use? Um, what do you need? Low light, highlight? Are you close up? Are you distance? What kind of uh, lenses do you need? Don't overpack. Mobility is often key to photojournalism. If you're carrying around a 10-pound camera all day long with the lens, it's going to become very uncomfortable. And if you're trying to carry two cameras and all that, they just get in the way. They can easily get damaged. I mean, it's very true. I'm really starting to understand that on my own end. Don't overpack. Um, lighting, you can rely on natural light. If you are going to be interior, you might want a flash or something to help enhance the lighting. All photography is, it's all about the lighting. You were literally capturing the light reflecting on the subjects. So think about it that way. Photography is light. How light hits something and how it reflects into your camera. So if you have incredible lighting, you're going to have an incredible picture. If you have almost no lighting or bad lighting or wrong angled lighting, you're never going to really get the picture that you're shooting or that you're trying to shoot for. So keep that in mind. The mindset, empathy. Approach your subjects as humans. They are. Don't assume that you can automatically just take pictures. Don't get in their faces thinking that they should be all so proud and honored to be photographed by you. They don't care who you are, to be honest. If they did care, they would be trying to hire you to be the photographer for them, not you trying to have them. If anything, you should be looking at it as to you're trying to hire them and you're trying to convince them as to why they should come work for you. That's the best way to think about it. Why should they come work for you and be your subject? Um, because it's all about trust. It's all about letting us into their lives and they're sharing their lives with us and for us to document it for them and for us. Patience and observation. The best moments unfold organically. Be prepared to wait, watch, and react. It's more about the about anticipation than forcing a shot. Eh, Think about it that way. Yeah. If you're a sports photographer, you know at some point there's gonna be a goal, there's gonna be some type of scoring, there's gonna be some letdown, some upset. You can't force it. You just have to be there waiting for those moments so you can record it. That's what being patient and observing is waiting for life to happen because it's always gonna happen. The sports analogy is a really good one. It's set in a time frame. Maybe nobody scores, goes into overtime, and it's just what it is. The upset of working so hard for no outcome is gonna be heartbreaking for everybody. You're still able to record that. With the Olympics happening right now, seeing the faces when their scores are being told, you see the celebration when it's high, and you see the upset when it's low. Um, eh, you know it's coming. You can't force it, but you know it's coming. Be sure to observe it and get your opportunity. Humility. Your job is to document the truth as you see it, not force your own agenda onto your subjects. And that's so true. You are not there to stage reality. You can stage assignment. So, what I mean by that is a cover of a magazine when you're working with a celebrity or a model or whatever, most of the time, all of that is staged. But when you're covering their real life isn't staged. Their real life is them. And show the humility of the honor that it is to be there. It's not you to enforce yourself or change who they are for you. You're there to document, not be a part of the story. That's the best way to look at it. You were there to be in the shadows, documenting what you see and how it is, not for you to be a part of the story. The second you put your own agenda, you are now a part of the story and you are no longer a documentarian on it. Additional tips. Study the masters. Um, Seek who has done it before. Who are some of the people that inspire you? Seek feedback. Um, Find out what people think about your photography and how you do your story arc and all of that. Should you find, if you're a journalist that focuses on writing, should you find a photographer and be the director of what it is that you want? Or do you want to just go take a photography class so you can capture better pictures? Um, Captioning counts. That is a great one. Write down what's going on. Write down who your subjects are. Write down where you're at and what's happening. As you're actually taking the pictures, take notes. Because when you were going through the 800 to 1,000 pictures after a day's worth of shooting, you're gonna kind of remember, but not fully. And you're gonna be like, okay, well, I know this was here with this person, but I don't remember why we were doing it this way, or whatever the case is. If you have notes to fall back on, when you go through and actually select what pictures you are wanting to work with, then you're able to really build in the captions the best way. Logistics and ethics. Access. Do you need permission to photograph in certain locations or releases from people? That is incredibly important. In public spaces, you do not need permission unless there's children involved. That's kind of that area that you really should get permission. Um, in private places, like if you're at a show, you don't have right to take pictures. You can actually get in trouble. You don't have any right to any of that. Um, your personal individual rights are only in public spaces or your own place. Other than that, private places, your personal rights really kind of don't exist. That's why businesses have the right to refuse service. As long as they're not being discriminatory to a class of people, they have the right for their own space. And that goes into getting permission to take pictures in a theater or a museum or any place. Ask for a press kit or a photographer's pass. Very important. Respect. Consider how to photograph vulnerable people in a dignified way. Do you need informed consent? Um, that one is very important. Homeless people, homeless youth, youth in general, um, indigenous people, a lot of times. Not talking about just American, but worldwide indigenous people. You need to understand the culture and have consent and make sure that they understand what they're consenting to. Um, it's very important. Famous examples. Um, the one on the left from the Great Depression. That the second from left is from um, coming back from World War II. There is JFK. And the ticket tape parade. I'm having a hard time seeing this one. I believe that's another Great Depression decibel. And then the one below on the right is the assassination of a Viet Cong soldier. Those are some of the most famous pictures in history. Some, not all. Here's the one that everybody, the woman with the eyes, definitely one of the most viewed photographs in the world. Um, oh, dang it. Um, Power of photography. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play a couple minutes of these. I do want you to go through, watch these videos in their entirety. They are incredible resources. Reynolds Journalism. There's the other from the Pulitzer Center. There's some incredible resources about how to really gather information and skill sets and how to really convey and tell a story from, like we said, find inspiration leaders. Find some of the best that are out there and learn from them. So here's some videos. I'm not going to play all of the videos. They will be either linked in or they will be in the actual PowerPoint itself by itself for you to go through, watch, and use them as a resource. But I'm going to play a little bit so you can understand. So you can see how these videos will really help um, give you more insight into what you're talking about. They just brought up political. And when I was talking about humanizing politicians, everybody talks about a politician holding a baby because that is one of the most humanizing, relatable images that people can see. And they can see how authentic and caring someone is by how they hold a baby. If they hold them like this, they're not very authentic. If they're holding them close and caring for them, you see them in a different light. You see them being caring and nurturing. Humanizing politicians is one of the primary goals. Because it allows you as a human to connect with them on a human basis, not just as a figurehead, but as a human to human. And you're building that story. Um, So yeah, these videos are great assets. There's Power of Photojournalism, Part 1. There's Part 2. Um, and goes more in depth into what it is. Part 2 goes Part 2 goes into telling the story. So yeah, you can really kind of see um how photojournalism can work. These are some of the best videos I could find from some of the best institutes. Um, Here's 7 photojournalism tips from Reuters. Um, This is a very long how to get started in photojournalism. It's a great resource. It is very long. I'm not even going to start it. Um, Journalist Toolbox from the Pulitzer Center is one of my great ones for learning how to create your story arc, learn how to do it, how to set up your comparables, how to blend imagery into telling a story. Um, Gonna go ahead and play a little bit of it.